Cool. Well, hey, I'm excited for you guys to be on here today. Welcome to our webinar, The Modern Marketer. In the next 45 minutes, I want to tell you everything that I know about building a powerful segmentation using the data that you already have as a marketer or as an operations leader within your company. My name is Leighton Faust, and I am the CEO of Spatial. I'm joined here by Jimmy Chase, who's our head of marketing design, and we have two special guests on the webinar today, John Morey and Dan Collins. John, Dan, welcome.
Thank you,
John
Leighton.
and Dan are they're both clients of Spatial, and they're used PersonaLive, and they're definitely segmentation and strategy experts. So we're going to have them in the end of the webinar to share a little bit about how they are using it. Okay, so quick agenda for today. Hey, we already saw how to use the Q&A. If you have questions, please drop them in as I am going. I would love to answer those questions at the end. So don't forget about that Q&A. Be using it while we are going. And we're going to be talking about building a powerful segmentation in the beginning. We're going to be talking about 3 different ways that you can build a segmentation or a combination of that ways. I'm going to share with you 5 hot principles for once you have a segmentation built, how do you take action on it? And we're going to talk about the 4 barriers that keep people from building a powerful segmentation. And then I am going to show you guys the PersonaLive segmentation is a segmentation that we have developed internally that can speed up that segmentation process. I'll do a demo, and then John Morey will be showing you a little bit how he uses PersonaLive for his clients for strategy. John, would you mind just giving everyone a high level on what you do and then how you use the segmentation?
Sure. Well, we are a market research and consulting firm, so we're not actually the implementers. And what we use is the data that's provided by in PersonaLive to really allow customers of ours that range in very, very small, that don't have a whole lot of capabilities, to very, very large that are performing very well. Somewhere in that spectrum, it allows them to use PersonaLive to do better, essentially, in a relatively easy way.
Cool. John is an innovator, and he pushes me, which is awesome. And a lot of the features that you see in PersonaLive, John might actually be behind them. And then Dan Collins. Dan, I met you and you were a partner at Modus, and then Modus was acquired last year by V. Dan, would you mind telling people a little bit about what you're going to be talking about and how you use it?
Absolutely. Again, thank you for having me here, Leighton. Appreciate it. Yes. So V is an enterprise AI platform focused in the health and wellness space. And so at the end of the day, it's a technology company. We specialize in data and utilizing data to understand consumer bases, their behaviors, how to target them for acquisition, and then ultimately how to engage with those consumers, retain them, upsell them, and really work through the entire life cycle in an end-to-end platform for consumer acquisition, engagement, and retention.
Cool. Great. Yeah, these guys are the ones that are taking segmentation to make the rubber hit the road. So stick on to the end to see that. Okay. As I'm going through this, I want you to ask yourself this question. What if you had everything you need today to expect results from a segmentation, like 100% increase in email click-through rate, a 3 to 7x higher paid social click-through rate, and a 50% reduction in customer acquisition cost? These are standard results from segmentation activities, and they're strong because segmentation should be a foundational part of any business strategy. But when it comes down to it, it's actually pretty simple. You are just not targeting the people that are not likely to transact with your brand. And I'm going to give you a model today that if you are not doing a segmentation, you can use to build the segmentation. And if you are doing a segmentation, you can use it to level up. But first of all, who am I? So like I said, I'm the CEO of Spatial. I've been doing market research for 12 years. I started out doing surveys and eventually got into ethnography. I'm based in Cincinnati. So there's a lot of CPG type of research going on here, and I was a consultant to Procter and Gamble and Johnson Johnson. And while I was doing that, I got to do the global segmentation for Band-Aid, Listerine, Gillette, Rogaine, and Visine, and a few more smaller brands. So I got a lot of experience with building segmentation, but there were two big problems that would trip me up when we were developing segmentations for these brands. Problem number one is these were long processes. It would take about 6 months. It was very expensive. And at the end, we built a segmentation. But then the question was, how do you take action on that after all of those surveys, out of all of that in-home research, out of all of that quantitative research? How then do you go target those people? How do you hit them on email? How do you do a direct mail campaign? How do you do a Facebook campaign? They stayed a little bit in a heady space and not as much in a concrete space. And that was very frustrating to me. The second problem that I would run into is that when we were building these segmentations, we would begin to understand people based on their demographics through screeners. And I would be sent into areas to study that area. And I would find that that area had changed significantly since the last census, which had everything to do about how we would study and choose the neighborhoods. And in one particular instance, I was sent into East Nashville. East Nashville of the 2010 census was a very low income community. And that's what I was supposed to be researching, how low income people specifically in this area in the South experience their consumer packaged goods. But when I got there, it was very different. The area had gentrified. You had really high income and low income people there. And it was extremely vibrant. There was like a lot of stuff going on here, and it's very different than what people expected. And at the last day of my trip, because you have gentrification there, you also, that brings crime. I ended up getting held up at the end of the trip in front of my Airbnb, which kind of shook me, but it really made me start to ask the question, how might we understand communities live in real time and go beyond demographics to see what these people are like based on what they do? And that is what spurred the PersonaLive segmentation that we launched in 2021. And now we have over 300 organizations that are running on the PersonaLive segmentation to understand their best customers, to identify where to reach them next and actually take that next step and reach them.
Well, and Leiden, if I might interrupt for 1 second, I think the next extension of what you all have done is probably everybody here has run some sort of segmentation analysis on their customer or potential customer platform. When we all run our own customizations, there's virtually no way, there's no universal way to match those segmentations back to a list purchase. You can't say, oh, I want to buy that looks like my segmentation. Well, my segmentation was based off of all my data. And the thing that you all offer is a way to, one, consistently define those segmentations that exist within the marketplace, but then also the actual application of it, which is for me most amazing, because now we can go say, oh, I want to get that Facebook list, or oh, I want to get that other list so I can run a direct mail campaign, literally by identifying, matching our segments from my customer base to those that might exist in the marketplace. And I think that's a huge asset to PersonaLive.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it really takes it full circle, and it makes it take it from a heady space to now we're actually doing the real work, which is what we want to do. Cool. Okay, well, let's talk about the framework that I want to give you guys today. It's the framework that we've been using for the past 6 years to build segmentations, and we call it the 3 edges framework. I'm going to show you where to get the data to build your segmentation, and then what to do with it. So when people think about segmentation, if you look up articles, people say, oh, there's 6 different types of segmentation, or 7 different segmentation data sources. When it really comes down to it, there's really just 3. Behavioral data, demographic data, psychographic data. We'll go through each one, how to get it and what to do with it. So behavioral data, this is number 1. It's the most important thing. It's your first party data. It's how people behave and interact with your brand. So if you're a restaurant, it's how people transact with your brand. So it might be people swiping a credit card at your restaurant. If you're e-commerce, it might be people actually buying something from your website, and it's how much they purchase. It might be interaction. So it might be people clicking on your website. What products are they're looking at? And then some people say, oh, I don't have any customer data. That might not be true. You might have a location, and in that case, you can use mobile data to see who's visiting or interacting with your site. And you can get these from companies that are partners of ours, like Near, like Placer, like SiteZeus, like Unicast, to actually see who's physically visiting your site if you don't have that customer data. But a lot of times you do. Even restaurants will often have the first name, last name of the person that transacted and their zip code, and you can do something with that. Okay. What do we do with our customer data if we only have first-party behavioral data to make a powerful segmentation? I'll give you a couple frameworks. One framework that I like to start out with, if you have transaction data, is RFM. Pretty much anybody can do a recency, frequency, monetary type segmentation. So recency is how recently have they come to your website, or how recently have they transacted with you? Frequency is how frequently throughout the year, and monetary is how much they spend when they do. Pretty much everybody has this, and you can create a really cool cohort that is useful and actionable. Let's say you have a cohort that frequently buys from you, spends a lot of money monetarily when they do, but they have not came recently. Well, that is a great opportunity for an email campaign or a retargeting campaign to pick up some low-hanging fruit. Another lens to look at your customers from is from a base audit lens. So this is pioneered by Peter Fader, who's based out of the Wharton School in Pennsylvania, and it is a time series look at your customers through a few different dimensions. So all my customers who purchased in Q1 of 2020, what is their lifetime value throughout time? All my purchasers who came in through this specific campaign, what has been their lifetime value? All of my purchasers that have come in through buying this product first, what is their lifetime value? There's some pretty cool insights that you can get there. I find retail brands are really successful with this base audit approach specifically. And then another way that you can use that is a look-alike audience. Okay, another way of segmenting your customers is through demographics. Now, this is probably the most commonly understood way, but people rarely actually have the data to be able to do this. I'm going to show you some ways that you can infer that. But where do you get it? It comes from your first-party data. You could get it from forums. If you're asking people their birthday, you know about how old they are. Another way that you can get this is through inference. Not a lot of people actually know about this. So with inference, you can infer the demographics of people through very little information that they give you. For example, if they have a zip code or if they give you a postal address, you can use the median demographics of their census block group to indicate their likelihood of being high income or low income. If they're coming from a zip code that's a high income, you can consider that customer as maybe a high income customer. Not perfect, but it is useful and it will work. Another thing that you can actually infer is gender, just using first name and last name. And gender is one of the most powerful indicators if people will transact, depending on the brand that you have. And you can use this to do some personalization that will absolutely get you a lift in click-through rates. Now, I've got it's about 2-minute training on how to do this with ChatGPT. You can actually use ChatGPT to put the first name, last name of all your customers in a list, and it will predict if they are male or they are female. I've got the prompts on how to do that, and I've got the template for how to do that. If anybody wants to get that training to how to do gender inference or zip code inference, go ahead and put GPT in the Q&A. And Jimmy will link that to you. So just put GPT in the Q&A and Jimmy will drop a link. Another way that you can do this is through syndicated data. So this is data that you can buy from somebody else like us. There's a few other providers that will give you the actual demographics of your list. Because we have the first name, last name, and address of those customers, and we know their demographics. So that's another way to get it. How do you use it? It's pretty obvious. Age cohorts, income cohorts, or you can use this for strategy. And lastly, psychographic. So this is people's behaviors, interests, and attitudes. So there's 4 S's from where you can get psychographic data. 1, surveys. 2, social. Second party data, and syndicated. And I'll explain these. Surveys is pretty obvious. This is what I used to do when I was doing research. Even though I used to do it, I'm not a huge fan of surveys. I do think there are some questions that you can only get through surveys. But I actually don't think they're a perfect indicator of what people will actually do when we have data on what people will actually do. Social is another one. A lot of people don't know this, but you have first name, last name, and a social media handle. You can connect with your customers on social and see what they follow. And that can be really, really interesting. Just to kind of contrast surveys versus social. For example, let's say you were considering building a gluten-free product and you want to do surveys to your customers to say, are you interested in doing gluten-free? Would you actually do something gluten-free? If they say, oh, yes, I'm interested, or I'd like to do this often, it's very different than looking on social media and saying, okay, these people follow 4 different gluten-free accounts where they're getting actual recipes for gluten-free. My bet is that the actual person who's more interested in gluten-free is the person that's following that account and raising their hand and saying, show up in my social media page. Okay, another place where you can get psychographic information is second-party data. Not a lot of people know about this, but it's connecting with other people's database that hold that second-party data. So let's say you are an outdoor goods retailer and you're thinking about creating a fishing line. You can actually work with Field and Stream, for example, share your customer database with them and see how many of your customers are subscribed to Field and Stream. If you find there's a lot of customers and there's a big opportunity there, and then you can take it that next step. And actually, when you release the product line, target those customers that are actually subscribed to Field and Stream magazine. I don't see a lot of people doing this with second party data. I totally think that they should. I think it's a good idea. Another way that you can do this is through syndicated data providers, companies like us that are collecting that social media data and second party data. What can you do with it? Okay, so this is a great opportunity for personalization, just like that outdoor goods retailer that I mentioned. You can personalize your content to them. You can create interest cohorts. You can do better targeting and then niche identification. I want to give you a case study of one of our customers. I feel like that does this really well. They're called Legacy Retail. They consult brands that want to get stocked in Walmart. And they were consulting a brand that had done a co-partnership with Sofia Vergara, which I believe is a Hispanic influencer. And this co-partnership, what they looked at is they saw all of the Walmarts in their sales, and they looked at where are people following Sofia Vergara on social media physically, where are people following with that psychographic data. And no surprise, the places where people followed Sofia Vergara had significantly more sales of this co-branded product. And that was interesting, but was even more interesting is there was 61 Walmart locations where people were following Sofia Vergara that was not carrying that. And so what they were able to do is convince the buyers at Walmart to carry that product, which of course is worth millions of dollars to that brand just getting stocked. Okay, so there's a framework for you. I have a full guide and training on how to build that, and it will take you step by step with Excel templates. If anybody wants that guide, go ahead and type guide in the Q&A, and then Jimmy will link that guide. It'll show you how to collect your customer data, do a RFM segmentation, and where to go get that other data. Okay, so you have built your segmentation. How do you take great action on it? And some of you on this call might actually already be here where you've built a segmentation. How do you make full use and get ROI from it? I'm going to give you 5 hot principles. First thing, challenge assumptions. So when you develop this, your customer might be very different than what you expect. So this happened with a customer of ours, Sequest. They're an aquarium with 14 different locations, and they believe that their customer was pretty much moms. When they did a demographic append, what they found is that about a third of their client base were singles and young professionals. Different than what they expected. They moved quick and had an idea, what if we release a date night package? So they released a date night package, and it became the #1 selling ticket package that they had overnight, and changed the business both in how they thought about their customers and their actual sales. But it also had an unintended consequence. They brought definitely singles that were going on dates, but they also found a new cohort of customers, which were dads that wanted to take their daughters on dates. So I always love what people see when they actually take action on this. Another thing is keep it simple. I think segmentation often gets way too complex, and a good segmentation is a segmentation that actually gets used. AAA is a really good example of this. So they actually just take all their segments and they group them up into 3 segments, which are sunset boomers, older people, wealthy families, and young professionals. And in an email campaign that they do for selling automotive insurance, all they're doing is just tweaking the image in the email and a little bit of the subject line for each of these segments. If it's an older person, show some older people in the copy and imagery. And the results are really good. They had a 14% higher open rate, 50% higher click-through rate, and the people that came to the personalized email were 50% more likely to actually buy an insurance policy when they talk to an insurance agent. 3, I love. So when you are considering a segment, think about the size of the prize. So there's 2 things that will give you the size of the prize, how valuable a segment is to you. 1, how much do they spend with you on average? 2, how many of them are there? I mean, that's pretty simple. And I like to think about this on an XY axis. Let's see if I can annotate there. So I'm going to give you a little tool here to think about it. Oh, I don't think I can annotate on this. Okay, hopefully everybody's seeing this. So here's your x-axis down here, y-axis over here. The y is spend. How much do people spend with you? The x-axis is how much do they make of your current customer set? And then there's a z-axis, which is how many of those people are there? So we got segment A makes up a small amount, segment B, a large part of the market. And that's just the total population that's targetable. So what you want is people spend a lot, people likely to transact with your brand that make up a huge portion of the population. I feel like Melting Pot is one of our customers that does a really good job with this. They identified a segment that spend 20% more on average with their brand. And nice, it also makes up a huge portion of the population around their 100 locations in their trade areas. And I'll give you an example of this in our platform. We do this in a really automated way. So this is just a hypothetical restaurant, and a way to look at this on the bottom x-axis. You can see the percentage of people that have bought from this restaurant in each one of the segments, the bubble of those segments. Y is how much they spend on average. And then the dot is the actual segment and the population of the market. So you can see this hypothetical restaurant, 32% of their customers, ultra wealthy families. It's a high penetration, but they only make up 140,000 people. Whereas Sunset Boomers, they spend a little more, spend $181 on average. They make up 646,000 people in Florida. And then Budget Boomers, which is, I would argue, is a great segment for them to consider. They don't spend as much, $11 less, but they make up 1 million people in Florida. I think this is an ignored segment for this particular hypothetical restaurant, so that you can identify how valuable they are to you and strategies for targeting. For these budget boomers who are lower income, I'd recommend for this restaurant to potentially release maybe a discount or cheaper meals. Okay, number 4, make it actionable. Quick Quack Car Wash does a really good job of this. You got to make it simple and choose which segments that you want to go after, and not be specifically targeting each segment around each one of your locations. Quick Quack Car Wash made 3 different regional segmentations for their 192 different locations. And they just ported that directly into Facebook and started targeting those people on Facebook. And it worked out really well for them. They had a 20%, 27% higher click-through rate, 42% lower cost per click. And then lastly, man, people love maps. I was just reading a book looking at the map last night. I love maps too, personally, but Here's an example of how mapping your customers will really help. There's a company called Brixmore. It's a property ownership company, and they had purchased a retail location with an anchor location and a bunch of open locations. They really need to get that anchor location filled with a good retailer. They were talking to an organic boutique grocery store, and we're having a hard time convincing them that they should go in because the demographics did not indicate the high enough income. But when they were able to map the fact that a lot of people follow Whole Foods in that location, that was able to convince that organic grocery anchor to move in, which totally changes that center. So seeing it on map really helps. Okay. So those are the 5 principles. I want to hear from you guys. Out of the 5, what was the most helpful and what do you feel like you could use today? 1, challenge assumptions. 2, keep it simple. 3, size a prize. 4, make it actionable. 5, map it. What was the most useful for you guys there? 1, challenge assumptions. 2, keep it simple. 3, size the prize. 4, make it actionable. And put that in the Q&A. Cool. Sweet. Okay. Lastly, we'll go through barriers. So we know segmentation works. We know it's useful. What stops people from actually taking action on this? Demi, would you mind putting up our poll? So we just did this survey a while ago with 75 different people in the market research group in LinkedIn to see what is their number 1 challenge that they experience when developing a segmentation. Is it time restraints, cost, lack of in-house resources, or uncertain ROI? And I'm curious, John, Dan, as people are starting to answer this, so Jimmy's going to put up that poll. Please answer, what is the most challenging thing for you? Dan, John, what do you feel like your customers find to be the most challenging with segmentation?
I mean, for us, it's cost and lack of in-house resources, which would generally be like you can do the segmentation, but just as AAA did, where they segmented their messaging. Most of our clients can't really do that, so they lose out on the power of it. They can segment, but then they can't segment their own messaging.
Yeah, resources, sure.
And I'll agree with John. What we hear most is the cost. Putting together a system that can analyze segmentation and help really understand it and make it useful. It can be expensive. That's why this tool is so useful. But the lack of in-house resources, which goes into time constraints a little bit, would be the top. ROI certainly can be one. But if you are able to utilize segmentation and work through the attribution case, that ROI is relatively simple to prove. So that is not really a challenge now, but I understand where it could be.
Cool. Cool. Sweet. Jimmy, can we see the results of that?
Yep, I am closing the poll and sharing the results. So time restraints, 33%, cost, 20%, lack of in-house resources, 40%. And then the top one was uncertain ROI.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Let me show you the results from that. It was similar. So time constraints, cost, lack of in-house resources, and uncertain ROI. My feeling from this is that uncertain ROI is a symptom of one of the top 3. You know what I mean? So I think that was interesting. It can be hard to develop a segmentation. You can totally develop a segmentation on your own. I believe that. But this issue is one of the reasons why we developed the PersonaLive segmentation. I'm going to show you guys a quick demo of that today, of our segmentation. And actually today, we are releasing our adapt feature for the first time. So you guys will be some of the first people, definitely the first people publicly to see our adapt feature. Okay. So what is the PersonaLive segmentation? It is a segmentation of US households based on 3 factors, and they should sound very familiar to you. 1, it's their demographics, age, income, first name, last name, are they married, do they have kids, etc. 2, psychographics, and we get that from social media. What do they follow? What do they hashtag? It's public social media on Twitter and Instagram. And then 3, behavioral data. Where do their mobile devices go? Are they going to Walmart? Or are they going into high-end furniture retailer? So those 3 factors make up our segmentation, and classifies every individual and household into one of these behavioral segments that nest into 17 higher level families. I'm going to jump into this, not going to go to detail on the segment. They're more predictive because they include behavior. And one of the things that I love, it's real time, so it's not old like the census. The other thing that I love is you can see what these people are talking about, and they're categorized behaviorally, not just demographically. So you can see a segment name, some information, their age, their income, but you can also see what are they hashtagging right now. This specific segment, it's our highest income segment, are hashtagging climate action, finance, and philanthropist. You can see live in-store visitation. You can see where their mobile devices go. So these people 5 times as likely to visit Orbis, web visitation, channel preferences, and a demographic snapshot. All this data is live and throughout time. You can see the geographies where these people show up. You can see the stores that they visit, the brands that they follow, the channels where you can reach them on, social media topics they're using, influencers, people they follow, web visitation, and demographics. And then typically how this is used is append, analyze, activate. And this is where we speed up that process of segmenting your customers. Append, you're either appending mobile data or customer data. So if you have a customer list in CSV, you just upload that list, and it should include a customer ID, an email, first name, last name, or a postal address, and we can match to our database to show you what segment that person is. And then you just push that through and you drop that in here. Once you do that, you can go to the Analyze. Here you're going to see a bunch of mobile data reports that I've ran. If you're working with a mobile data provider, you can upload your mobile data in here and we can segment that. Otherwise, if you're using your customer list, you go to Customers. And we can see, for example, this nonprofit donations data set. This nonprofit, 52% of their donors come from these ultra wealthy family segment. And then you can jump into that segment and understand everything about it, even how to personalize your advertising to that segment. You can see the age ranges of those people, income ranges, if they're married, do they have kids, and their gender of the donors in this case. And this married or children, this is where the aquarium found that they had a bunch of singles that are part of it. But once you actually want to take action on that, you hit activate families, and you can push this into a marketing campaign and then begin targeting your best customers wherever those people are. So if you want to target them on Meta, you just put in your Meta ID. If you want to target them in Google, you can put in a Google ID. You can even do a direct mail approach, or you can target them with a list data set, for example, on Twitter. And you can cut this and say, I only want females in this group because I'm doing a female specific product, or I only want these people in Alabama, for example. And you're going to see there's 217,000 targetable people in Alabama. And then lastly, this is what we are introducing today, the adapt part, which is now you can see how do your segments respond in real time to your campaign so you can quickly adapt. And you're going to see a campaign that I've been running for the past 2 days here. It's got 2 days worth of data on a Facebook ad that I am running. I've got 7,222 impressions overall, a 6% click-through rate. And then I can see each of my segments. So my A and C segments have a 7% click-through rate versus my J segments on this ad have a 5% click-through rate. Now, you might find some of these customers more valuable to another, so you might want to spend more on that, and that's fine. But what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to cut all my spending here on my young professionals and sunset boomers. I'm going to put it all into the segments where I have a better click-through rate. So now you can adapt and respond on the fly. Okay, so that's the PersonaLive segmentation. What really matters, though, is how this works when the rubber hits the road. And we're going to have John and Dan walk you through that. Dan, would you mind walking people through how you use the customer segmentation?
Of course. Again, thank you. the way we are utilizing customer segmentation for acquisition at V is we're obviously our platform is intaking all of our customer data, and we're appending mobile data and the psychographic data as well. We're using a number of data sources. It's something like 70,000 potential data points per household to really get down to the exact consumer level. Once we have that data appended, we're going to analyze those target households that we see through the predictive analytics in the system, what an optimal cost per acquisition and lifetime value would be for each one of those consumers. Once we do that, we have the ability to activate those targets via existing media channels. So primarily it's going to be social channels, search channels, programmatic display, et cetera. And then we're going to assess those results by analyzing the converted consumer lists. That varies by industry. Like I said, we're in health and wellness, so we run everything from health clubs to hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. So the attribution is a little bit different for each, but we want to make sure that we're optimizing that acquisition cost and the lifetime value for each one of those use cases. Here's a couple of examples of case studies that we've run with particular clients. So we're talking about two health clubs here. The first one that you're looking at on your left-hand side of the screen there is the goal was to increase new member count, decrease cost per acquisition. So in this case, the target cost per acquisition was $60. And we actually turned in through the case study period, through the pilot, about a $26 cost per acquisition. So 53% lower acquisition cost than the target to begin with, which was their historical information with previous efforts, where website traffic increased by over 15%. And 75% of their new member acquisition came through this particular program, through these marketing efforts, utilizing consumer segmentation and acquisition funnels. The one on the right-hand side, again, this is another example of a health club group, and their target cost per acquisition was $34. Cost per lead target was $18, again, based on their historical acquisition and lead generation costs. What we found is utilizing a very targeted consumer database with the consumers that have the highest propensity to be interested in engaging with this brand and ultimately joining, we were able to get a $10, just over $10 cost per lead, and just under a $19 cost per acquisition, again, from a $34 target base.
That's great. I love the focus on efficiency. And I just feel like that brings us back to the beginning of the webinar where we're talking about it's not targeting the people that are not likely to actually transact with your brand. It's great.
Yeah, the efficiency of marketing spend is really where this comes in, and being able to intelligently target at that level is going to make that marketing dollar much more efficient. And if you can predict what those acquisition costs, ultimately predict what the lead cost and acquisition costs will be, you've got a great starting point to really improve customer acquisition costs for your clients.
John, you want to talk through how you use it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Again, we're not necessarily the implementers, so the way that we approach it is probably more from designing strategy. And so I think many of the people on this webinar might be able to use what we're talking about and how they apply it into their own business. And so, like I said earlier, we do a lot of work with basically zoos, museums, aquariums, not-for-profit cultural attractions, but we also do business work as well for an apparel company and a biscuit making company. So it's interesting because we watch how the same principles apply. And so a couple of things. So one is we use this data to help our clients inform some of their research or strategy. So many of our clients want to diversify their audience, ensure that they're serving the underserved, those types of things. And many businesses want to then oftentimes diversify their clientele as well. So people will put forth those efforts. So I have one client that says, yes, that's what we do. We spend all this money doing it. We build all these programs to do it. And then they can use this research to identify that actually about 33% of their guests are low-income households, which is overrepresented as compared to their market. And so what that immediately tells them is that they're over-indexing. They're performing at a higher level than it's representative in the population. Becomes a huge thing. One is they know what they're doing is working, but two, they don't need to keep coming up with so many ideas and waste so much time trying to accomplish something that they've actually already accomplished. So that becomes a beautiful thing. Defining size, that kind of dovetails into kind of what you were saying earlier, Leiden, and then Dan for sure, is defining the size. So again, most of our clients or lots of people believe that the population of your market is your potential. It is 100% not. And so what we can do is use data. So for example, we can identify who visits cultural attractions in a marketplace, tie that back to an attendance number, and then match that back to the DMA that is included when you run a segmentation profile, Leiden. We always get the base, which is your market, and then we get the percentage that exists in that market. And so this becomes a beautiful thing, because you can say, moving into the acquire customers below, right? You can use this to define what your budget is going to be. So if Dan's saying it's $18 per, all right, fine. How many people that are high propensity are in my market that I can then target? If it's 100,000 and you want to actually invest that much for 18 per, well, now we know that it's 1.8 million. Versus just saying, oh, well, let's just say it's a $500,000 campaign or a $5,000 campaign. It doesn't really matter. This approach allows you to define what your budgeting strategy would be. How much am I going to spend? And at least from a test. And then I'll just cite 3 different ways on the acquiring customers where I find that this same process helps those that are performing at high levels, those that are performing, let's say, at medium or average levels, and those that are underperforming. It's interesting that you can do one thing and applies to all 3 of these groups. So our high performing clients, if they were to add more advertising in their market, would not see a gain in increased visitation. They wouldn't. They can't hit the same people with more of the same messages in the more of the same places. So we use this, what we call nooks and crannies. And so we can then use that segmentation, match it back to the population to see where there might be places where these clients might be missing. And generally the way that they will miss them is through the digital advertising strategies, because the algorithms, for some reason, don't hit these people. So I'll cite one client who ends up buying a list for 500. They buy 500,000 in Phoenix, buys a list of 500,000 people, matches that back to their own internal list, and sees that there's a 70% match. And one could argue, you might say, oh, well, that's a huge waste. We already have a 70% match. Guess what? They now have 135,000 additional people that they can run digital advertising campaigns to that they weren't talking to before. And they can do it in a very segmented way. So that allows those high performers to perform even better. The medium performers, so let's say they're already doing well in their core markets or the primary markets, we can use this technology to identify, well, who's going to other places and do they segment differently than ours? And now we can target those folks. And then the final, and this is the best, is the underperforming organizations usually underspend. Their resources are usually the lowest. They don't have the money to commit. They don't even sometimes have the, let's say, in-house resources to run sophisticated campaigns. And this works super, super easy. Just as Leiden, you were demonstrating in your example, you could see those high propensities. So people, which segments are most likely to buy from us, let's say. Well, that's where you start. And so you build your campaigns around who is most likely, because you haven't yet maxed out your performance in that. And so you can build these smaller campaigns targeting these targeting high propensity people, and off you go.
John, what you're saying about the looking at the actual number of people in the market makes me really think about that. We just had 47% of people say uncertain ROI for the effort. And what you're saying is like, you know how much they're spending, you know how many people there are there, which is great. You can knock out that uncertainty right now.
Oh, I just was literally on a call this morning, and they were trying to understand what would be an appropriate ad budget size. So we just went through the math, and it's literally, we use your work as the foundation to that. I mean, that makes it super, super easy.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you everybody for sticking on here till the end. I want to share with you our offer. Because you guys stuck on to the end, if you go and sign up for a demo right now, we have 3 things that we want to offer you that are just for this webinar. And we're going to give this to the first 10 people that sign up for a demo from this webinar. So Adapt, no cost. This is usually a $1,500 add-on. We're going to give that for free. We're going to give 5 Polygon reports and then 3 one-on-ones with us to work on building this with you and using your segmentation. And if you want to take advantage of that offer, all you got to do is go to Spatial, hit Schedule Demo, and you're going to see my face telling you to schedule a demo down here. Okay, we'll leave just a little bit of time for Q&A, but also want to give you guys a thought as you are leaving. Based on what you just saw, you pretty much have 3 different options that you can take now. 1, you can do nothing. That's totally fine. Maybe you've got to find segmentation, or maybe segmentation is not just too much for you. 2, if you want to build a segmentation yourself, you can do that. And then 3, if you want this done, almost done for you, you can work with us. You can also work with John or Dan, and they can actually build all this for you. You don't even have to touch or interact with that platform. So those are your options. I would love to run through Q&A. I know we're a little bit over, but I want to do a few questions. I've got 1 question here, but hit a few questions in the Q&A box if you can. Okay. What if you're already a Persona customer? Can we get a demo on the analyze and adapt features only? Yes, absolutely. Go in there and schedule a demo, and we can do demo on the analyze and adapt features for sure. Seeing another question here. Where is the social media coming from? It's coming from public social media. Public social media. It's Twitter, Instagram. If you can find it on Google, we can get it. If you can't find it on Google, we cannot get it. Okay. All right. That's about all the time that we have here. Hey, John, Dan, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, everybody, for staying on. Love hanging with you. Go schedule a demo if you want to talk soon. All right. See you, everyone.
Thanks, Lynn.